Welcome to the Sales Confidence and SalesLoft webinar, where we're going to be talking about what we've learned from 2021 and how we're going to be focused on 2022. We're going to be asking our esteemed guests today to cover 3 key areas around how has 2021 and the shift into the hybrid workplace affected your team, how you structure your team in hiring, how you think about dealing with customers, and the personal side, how we deal with mental health both individually and our teams. So for once, I've actually got Ollie Sharp stepping up as the host. Give us a wave, Ollie. Let everyone know you're here. And if you can give us, let us know in the comments where you're dialing in from. So Ollie Sharp is currently the VP of Revenue at SalesLoft. Previously, he spent over 10 years at LinkedIn, where I had the good fortune of joining him back in the day. So Ollie's going to be our host today, and he's going to be guiding the questions. We're then followed up by Penny. Penny joined iManage at the start of 2020 as their Global Commercial Director, having previously been VP of Sales at Aprio. And prior to that, she spent 13 years at Merrill Corporation, joined as their Senior Vice President of Sales, and then went on to head up sales. We are just waiting on Enrique. Enrique should also be joining us from Ultimate, the leading virtual agent platform, since arriving in November as the Executive Vice President of Sales. So Enrique, if you're on the other side, come backstage, please, because we need you here. So hopefully we can get Enrique on the line shortly. And then last but not least, we've got Natalie Barry. Natalie mentioned me after 8 years with global SaaS business Datto, where she led customer and partner growth. And she heads up the sales function of Mention Me, leading the motivated and high-performing team to accelerate new business. So I'll hand over to Ollie, and Ollie, I'll get you to take forward the mic.
Thank you, James. Thank you. And thank you, Natalie and Penny, for turning up on time as well. I won't take this out of Enrique. So as James said, we're going to be looking at what we've learned from 2021 and prior to that with everything that's happened, and dig into what's changed and what we'll continue to do to be successful. As James said, looking at workplace and team, how we interact with customers and how we communicate with them. And also, you'll keep seeing my dog coming up, and I know it's a bit of a pain, but a bit needy, sorry. And also the personal side, how we look after ourselves and our teams. So we're going to start with the workplace, think about the office environment and these kind of things, understanding what's changed and what do we now need to be mindful of. So I don't think it's as simple as we all think. Penny, let's start with you. Now that I think most companies are going sort of more into the hybrid work environment, what do you think that we need to be thinking about for the technology, the etiquette, the whole environment that we're building?
Yeah, when I look back last year, I think the interesting thing about iManage was actually the sales organization was already working relatively remotely and in a hybrid model anyway. But I think what really changed was that our customers were a lot last year as well. So the interaction with our customers, which we'll talk about in the second point, was what did change. I think the focus for us last year was people, as in most companies. We were looking at employee retention, because obviously it was the Great Resignation. Hiring was a big thing because it was incredibly competitive and still is. And then really the third thing in that was, how do we improve communication and connectivity while everyone is completely remote? And so we did that in a couple of ways last year, which we brought into this year. The first one was the OKR process. So how do you get alignment and people are focusing on impact and not spinning their wheels on endless Zoom cycles? I think the other thing was the technology piece you talked about, which was we invested in some of that technology that would kind of replicate that in meeting room experience. So things like Miro boards, Jira, certainly where you could collaborate more easily in remote working. So for this year, we're going to move, people are still a big priority for us. I think the next thing about investing in the technology is because we're going to most likely keep the hybrid working outside of sales as well. So in order to do that, what we've had to think about is investing in the meeting room technology. So how do you make people who are dialing in remotely feel included in a meeting, even though they're not in the room with you? So we've improved the cameras, the TV screens in the room, the sound. And then we've also worked alongside that with meeting room etiquette. So this idea where you have to look at a screen, right? Because some people will dial in and everyone will be having a nice chat in the room and forget someone's on the screen. So it's making sure you've got the link, you turn up on time, the agenda's given, and that you're actually including the people on the screen. So that's what we're focusing on this year. And we're doubling down on the OKRs, which I'll cover later.
Cool, thank you. And go on, Natalie, sorry, carry on.
It's quite interesting on the meeting room etiquette piece as well, because one of the, I think the key things in terms of workplace environment that's changed for us is previously we were all in the office. So we're about 100 people at Mention Me, and every single person was in 5 days a week pretty much. And in the midst of COVID, as we were allowed to start going back in, we agreed that it would be 2 days a week. So Wednesdays, Thursdays, everyone comes back in the office. But what we found, or what I found specifically with some of the more junior team members, so SDRs who are maybe fresh graduates or newer people into sales, is that, you know, they might have actually only have had their whole professional career working from home. And so there was quite a nervousness at them coming back into the office, and they felt quite a lot of stress and pressure because they were very nervous around people listening to their calls, where they've been naturally able to just be within their own comfort zone and knowing that no one's judging or hearing them speaking to a client or to a prospect. So I think we had to realize to be very sympathetic to that as a real concern. And it was becoming quite a blocker of people wanting to come in, especially the newer salespeople. So what we've done is making sure that we've got strict policies on meeting rooms as well, in a slightly different way, so that they are prioritized and saved for prospecting client calls, so that people feel they can come in, be productive and not be distracted, like they're still in their kind of own homework environment. And we've also found extra space within our building so that people feel they can, you know, go away and make those calls and not have that distraction around them. So I think that's been a real key takeaway for us that we're moving into this year, is being aware of the confidence level and the routine that certain team members have gotten used to, and make sure that the office environment is enjoyable for them, and not just assuming that everyone's going to be happy to work from their desk all packed in, sitting behind each other and on top of each other like they were in pre-COVID times. So really thinking about those alternative areas or spaces that you can offer to make feel comfortable when they are coming in has been important for us.
Cool. Enrique's just dropped, but he's got a meltdown on his laptop, so he's not having a good time of it, but he will be back with us soon. And something you've both sort of mentioned a little bit is the getting together and stuff. How do you think we should be thinking about collaboration? Because it's never easiest for sales, marketing, HR, and everyone to collaborate together. Now that some people are remote, some people are in the office, Enrique, welcome back. How do we plan to collaborate better when there's a mix of hybrid and office people?
I mean, I have some thoughts, I think, from an organizational level as well, which sales needs help from other departments more and more, right? You mentioned marketing for sure, customer success. One of the things that I talked about was we kicked off OKRs, which are really hard to do. We got an outside consultant in this year to help us be better at it. And what that has done is do a couple of things. One, get that cross alignment across marketing, sales, and customer success. So we're all collectively owning the same goals, or at least some of the same goals and key results, right? So marketing and sales sign up to commitments. We've also, the second thing is prioritizing, because we all know we've got tons to do in companies, but actually we often go down rabbit holes. And so making our time as effective as possible and prioritizing those most impactful events across the functions has been really, really important for us. And we spent quite a bit of time this month doing that.
Yeah, we've had similar in that we've just started rolling out 4DX, which is a framework. I don't know if you guys have heard of that before, but it's 4 disciplines of execution. So rather than the goals and milestones that we were working towards before, it really tries to have a cross collaboration, like cross departmental strategy, whereby you kind of pick goals that are, they call them wildly important goals, essentially. So they're things. I think Penny's shaking her head.
I love this because we've been doing like a Wix, right? Yeah, wildly important goals.
Yes, there's war, there's battles.
What's the book called? Sorry, there's a book about it.
Yeah, it's 4DX. It's called, and so the company has a war. So it might be, say, I don't know, hitting revenue or a growth goal. Then you have individual battles, and then WIGs, so wildly important goals. And within those WIGs, you have teams cross-departmentally. So for sales, it might be increasing a conversion rate or something like that, or the ACV, the average contract value of your deals. And what works really well is there's a very set structure where you have weekly meetings with that team, and you come to the meeting and all agree just very small actions. And what it means is you can take marginal gains, but it's collaborative across lots of different departments. And every week you come back and there's accountability that you have to have completed your action. And then you keep a scoreboard of the WIG and the kind of lead measures that you're tracking. And we roll those up on a Monday, and every Monday meeting, we will talk to, as a whole company, these are some of the movements within each of those WIGs that are looking really well. And so that's something I'd recommend people look at 4DX as a framework. So that's working really well for us. It's early days, but the cross collaboration is much better than it was when we were doing our traditional goals and milestones last year.
Thank you. Enrique, tell us about, I mean, you left G2 lockdown, you've started a new job now, you've obviously got changes within your own culture as well, but what is it that you're mindful of when taking everyone back to the new, what we're going into now? And also think about hiring. How's it impacted your hiring?
Yeah, hi everyone. Been dealing with technology, which is part and parcel of our new reality. Look, yeah, hiring. I found that not just hiring, but all forms of time measured professional activities have been compressed now, right? When we're looking at how quickly our people are developing and how quickly they're able to acquire skills, I think that the average tenure that people go through in terms of progressing or even staying with businesses is shrinking. We know sales cycles are shrinking, right? And unsurprisingly, with hiring, I'm finding that hiring is much quicker now, right? If you just think about how, yes, some face-to-face steps in the hiring process are going back, are coming back in, but previously it was pretty much everything was in person, right? So the hiring cycles are much shorter. When you couple that with the fact that there's so much growth, especially in sales at the moment across the board, it is a candidate's market, right? We've really found that our hiring has really been compressed, and like many other companies, we're hiring quite aggressively into our teams. We can't have drawn out processes anymore. So we're now having like SLAs of like from first screening call to offer or no offer is 10 days, no longer than that at every level. But especially for more junior roles, we're finding that we can actually turn those around even quicker. So for us, hiring is much quicker. The other things we're seeing now as well is that whereas maybe 12 months ago, everyone wanted to make sure that you had a remote setup and that they could work remotely and from wherever they want, a lot of people now want an office, right? Not because they're dying to come into the office 5 days a week, and they probably won't appreciate the fact the company might have a policy where they might be asking people to come in specific days of the week, but they want to know that if they want to come in, they have the freedom to do so. And so we've kind of like started to shift away from having, a small number of significant offices with a lot of amenities to actually having smaller offices in more locations where we have clusters of staff where they do want to have a place where they can meet up and collaborate. So there's definitely been a shift in terms of office space as well, strategy. And finally, the other thing I reflected on, I think we talked about it previously, Ollie, was that, if you have a distributed team now, and I think most sales leaders will, it's really important to be sensitive to the fact that different countries are operating under different restrictions, right? So really knowing the rules of each location, not just in terms of how you set expectations with your teams, in terms of how you should meet up, under what circumstances, and what's required legally. We know in the UK now things are quite loosened up. There is no work from home mandate anymore. But we have a lot of our people are based in Germany, and we're going to do a gathering next week. And guess what? Being double jabbed is not enough to set foot in a restaurant in Germany. You have to be double jabbed and have a test, or in the absence of a test, a booster, right? So like being aware of all of those different circumstances with a distributed team, I think is something that we've really had to sort of up our game in as well.
I agree. It's funny when you said that. I remember when everyone used to go, "Can't we work from home?" And now they're going, "Can't we go to an office?" It's completely changed around. They're sort of what they don't have is what they want. And Penny, how have you changed the process, the hiring process, because of what?
We've to Enrique's point, we've had to be quicker about it and more efficient. So there's a couple of things. One, it's about what are you interviewing for? So I think looking at certain attributes or qualities is really important, particularly with these uncertain times. So we always talk about resilience. How do you test for it? How do you test the skills, certain skills or attributes you're looking for? So we've had to look at the hiring process, make sure it's quicker and smoother. So how many interviews are you doing? What's the purpose of each interview? Which skill set is one person interviewing for? Making sure those questions and that feedback loop is there. So if there's no more than 3 people interviewing, both the interviewee and knows exactly what the output of that meeting is. It's a quick, efficient process. And then the feedback is really important between those, so that each person's testing for one thing. I think that's what we've had to we're still working on it. We still haven't got it anywhere near perfect, I hasten to add.
Cool. And Natalie, what about yourselves when it comes to hiring? Has anything changed for you? Are you doing things differently?
I think the same as everyone else said is you've got to be quick, because people are coming in and out of the market so much quicker than before. The one thing that I've added into my interview process and encourage my other kind of hiring managers as well is sometimes the thing I think is missing from the remote interviews, which all of mine still have been, where they've all been online since COVID really, is being able to have the time to also have that chat and feel whether or not it's a culture fit. So my first interview, or the first part of the process, once we've had our recruitment person talk, is I also ask for a 30-minute call, which is just completely informal. And we actually do that first. And it's just getting a sense of the person and their personality. And it's actually a two-way call, in the sense of my aim is that they're more sort of interviewing me. I'm trying to get them on board with Mention Me first. And so after that first call, they often come away really excited. They feel like they haven't had that grilling or whatever yet, and they're much more excited to move forward with the interview process. And then we make sure from a formal perspective, where we're really digging into the CV and asking kind of, situational based questions and things like that, that we keep it limited to 2 further kind of formal interviews. But I found that half an hour chat or informal chats working quite well, because you can do that one day before, the actual formal interview, and it's not adding that much more time. But I feel like it's putting us in a more positive light, and they feel they're more aligned with us as well, and they know a bit more about me as a manager than they might otherwise.
I think it's a really good point, because I think that because of how competitive talent it is for talent at the moment, it's a two-way process. It's no longer are they right for the job. It's also are you right as an employee for them, and a team and a culture for you. Okay, so thank you. We're going to move on to the next part, the next point. So because people's diaries, they're working from home, etc., it's harder to get in front of clients. It's harder to get their time, the commitment, etc. And there's 2 parts to this. So how do we increase the chance of getting their time and getting their attention to even get in front of them to start? And then how do we actually build the messaging that we make most of that time when we're in front of them? Enrique, let's start with you while we've still got you. How should we be looking to get the attention to get in front of clients? What's important?
Look, I feel like I come from a really good place, having been at G2 for 3 years, because we were all about how do we get more buyers in front of software vendors, right? And the right software vendors. Look, I think what you've got to be asking yourself is this: if I'm lucky enough, or fortunate enough, I shouldn't say luck, to get some time with a prospect during a sales cycle, how can I make sure, number one, that I can add real value, right? Number 2, they will remember this interaction, right? Because we all know that in this day and age, with the lack of in-person meetings, a buyer is able to meet with a lot more vendors, a lot more of your competitors than they used to. Not only that, right? The buyer now is a lot more skilled in doing their own research. And so you've got to bring it, right? You've got to come prepared. There's no like, let me tell you everything you don't know. No, you've got to come prepared with a point of view. And 2 thoughts on a couple of things on technology and also on live meetings, because live meetings, I believe, are coming back, but in a different way. But on technology, I think we talked a little bit about, I think you mentioned a little bit about technology, Penny, earlier, but like, it's not enough to just arm your reps with like video conferencing software and a nice screen at home anymore, right? Like they need tools now that are going to allow them to automate and personalize their digital interactions at scale, right? So how do you make sure that you can reach as many more buyers than you used to at scale in a personalized way, right? So, and I'm talking sales engagement software, sales enablement software, right? Data tools, AI. Like, you need to be thinking as a sales leader, what tools are available there that I don't have yet in my team that's going to allow them to add value and make memorable interactions. And then finally, on live meetings, whether they're in person or digital, right? You've got to bring it, right? We don't have the time anymore for 2-hour discovery meetings, right? Or 1-hour demos, right? Your window of opportunity is much smaller. So you've got to come prepared. You've got to bring credibility. You've got to have done your homework. And I believe more and more sellers need to come with a point of view, right? If you can build credibility and you have a point of view and an opinion, people will value that. You've got to leave a lasting impression. And I think that's a really good and strong way of doing that.
Cool. Natalie, I know that you were talking before about, not today, but the other day, about sort of the messaging, how important the messaging is, and what you go to those prospects or clients with. Tell us more about that and what you're doing in that area.
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to the question. So firstly, getting their attention. I think the main thing we've realized is that we must focus our whole go-to-market strategy around ICP selling. So specifically selling based on our ideal customer profile and their needs. And actually we did a huge piece of work, basically worked out about 100 different segments of different types of customer that fall into then 3 ICP categories that we have moved forward with. And about 95% of all of our opportunities last year were in those categories. And what's then really important about that is we completely rewrote our entire sales playbook, how we enable the team with sales plays, how to market to them, how to objection handle, and did that based on the different ICP profiles that we have, and specifically collaborating more with marketing than we ever have done before to ensure that we've got, dependent on which bucket does this sit in, we're going to capture their attention because we're using the right collateral, the right testimonial, the right video case study, the right blog post that's relevant to them. And that's all been put into a personalized campaign. So it's also like, it's almost mini ABM kind of, campaign marketing relative to those prospects' needs. So that was really important for us. But then the key thing, I think, is making the most of the time when you're in the sales process as well. So we have found it really hard to get into the board meeting now, or to actually pitch to the people sometimes that are making that final economic decision. And so often you've only got really a one shot at presenting and leaving an impression on the company. So we've really stepped up our game with our branding team and design team to ensure that our product is coming across as mature and professional visually in the decks that we use as well. So we completely redid all of our decks with new branding, redesigned them, and have templates for all the different stages in the sales process. So a discovery deck, a demo deck, a proposal deck, a ROI deck, because we know that it's unlikely that we're actually going to be able to present that proposal in the board meeting, but we're going to have to give them a really amazing piece of content that our champion can take in with them. And so not only have we made sure that the design and marketing team have helped us to do that, like product marketing, but also we've invested in some tools too. So we've just invested in a tool called, I think, Turtle. I think it's like Turtle without an E. It's really cool. It basically allows you to create better digital experiences, and it's interactive content. So it's things that actually jump off the screen when you send it in an email or things like that. So again, it's just trying to find ways that we then stand out when we can't necessarily be the one in the room anymore. So that's something that we've really had to think about.
I think that's interesting. I think it's something that we've seen a lot of as well, that we're prepping champions rather than speaking to economic buyers a lot. And it's important to realize that, because sometimes you're battling a fight that can't be won trying to get in front of the EB, when really just coach the champion to do better. And Penny, I know you guys have done a lot of work around messaging as well, for your market. Tell us more about that.
So when Natalie and I were talking before, go-to-market was a big thing we really started doing it for the first time last year. So a joint marketing and sales go-to-market plan. So it was something we hadn't done before, and this year now it's as part of the OKR process. But the ideal customer profile, I spent a huge amount of time in product marketing, and I am now looking at the ideal customer profile by segment. So exactly like that. What we've done is invest in content specialists. So hiring a content person who then builds out that rich content, because to your point, to everyone's point, we need to make it count when we're in the meeting. The other thing that we've looked at is different types of enablement. So the sales playbooks, yes, we've got those, but then how do you jump out? And so it's when you do that pitch, to your point, you have to nail it. But what are you actually telling someone? And we found that really things like storytelling, for example, a storytelling workshop, someone's going to remember a context or a story of something more than they will probably features, functions, and facts. Also, what do you do before the meeting? So we've had to do a lot more around how do you prepare your person before the meeting? How do you get them excited? Because you don't have that chat going up in the lift or having a chat to break the ice before you get in. And when everyone gets into a virtual room, they just want to get on with business. So how do we engage with one of those champions or someone we can connect with? So that's what kind of research do you do on the person before you go in, which sounds sales 101, right? But sometimes we don't do. So you've had to look at the type of research, where you're looking to find connections with a person, and how you're prepping them before the meeting. So different types of enablement. I think to deal with the virtual world, we've had to look on, and we've done also one other thing, which is voice of the customer interviews. So again, feeding into this content, how are we landing our message in the voice of who our prospects are, so they can relate to us quicker? And so we did a voice of the customer interview with a number of customers of ours, and we had heat maps on words, so certain words and terminology they use, and we rated the words based on the amount they were used in the recordings, and then fed those words back into the content so they could relate to the prospect.
Nice. It seems like a lot of it speeded up the way that sales was going anyway. It's just got us to a good place quicker, I think. So the third part of this, which is one of my favorites, is more around the mental well-being side, the mental health. And this is for us as individuals, as in us as leaders, because it's not always easy as a leader to look after our mental well-being, but also for our teams. And what I'd love to do is just get as many, I think there's so many people that are doing things, but it's about making sure that we're making others aware of the things we're doing, whether it is a stand-up that you're doing stuff or whatever, or training people differently. So love to see as many ideas as possible on this. And I think it's also important to attract talent, because how many times you've been for an interview, and when you start talking about how you look after the mental well-being of your team, that they're actually there is pickup, their eyes light up, and it's important for us to attract the right talent, as long as we're being honest about it. And I think there's two areas: there's the things we do and the benefits we offer. So Penny, let's start with yourself. What is it that you're doing, or your ideas that I know you're doing a couple of things at your company around mental well-being and caring for people?
So there was the kind of basics, I would say, that were implemented last year, which were, we'd have a Headspace mindfulness app that was paid for everyone to have access to. We had a 24/7 helpline that was there for mindfulness. We brought in training for volunteers, so they could be helpers, mindful help workers within the workplace. And then we've now just kicked off training for middle management and upper management. So anyone who has headcount, where they have to understand what management training looks like in a remote world, and also when under stress. So that's kicking off as well. So those are the things that are basics. And then I call them basics, they're not, but they kind of just should be there. I think there's been some fun things that we've also going to introduce, which I'll talk about in a minute. But from my perspective with the team, we introduced things like walk and talks. So when you do your one-to-one, encouraging someone not to be in front of a screen. So when it wasn't freezing and snowing, we'd be outside talking. And I'd say, well, let's go for a walk, or walk around the house if it's cold. Don't worry, we'd have a pre-read or not, and dedicate at least a large part of that to non-work. So we'd talk about themselves. So we had no emails for an hour over lunch, internal emails. And then we've also, because we're a global company and I'm in a global role, so I could have the States in the evening, we have a no internal email policy after 6. So what that does is you set your timer, you'll write an email, and then you'll set the timer for it to go in Outlook off in the morning during the person's work time. And we have Slack set as well in snooze. Our notifications are automatically turned off at, I think it's 5:30 or 6 until 9. So that's some of the basic stuff. And there's some more innovative things where a company I've consulted with called Media Lab Group, they've done a great thing this month where they kicked off a mental well-being, what's a month, but like they did a January month, I can't remember what they called it, and they had a calendar, and everyone got a goodie box in the post on January with a calendar of every single day of something that they would host or do. So it might be an inspirational talk, it might be a online yoga, it might be, and they had a little box of kind of goodies from Sustainable Goods, which I thought was a really nice idea.
Very nice. I like that. Enrique, what about yourselves? I know that, no, you carry on. I was going to talk about what Laura was talking about, which I loved what Laura was talking about, but you can tell us what you're doing.
Well, look, I think that, first of all, it's very easy to be busy, right? And to make yourself busy in these times, because it's very easy for you to pack your calendar from start to finish. So I think one thing that I've really tried to be strict with myself on is having time blocked out for important things that give me balance. And that might be different to what gives you balance, Ollie or Penny, right? But I think that's really important. And because my calendar is open, as a leader, I make sure that people know that I've got time blocked out in the middle of the day to go for a run, right? Or to pick up our daughter from nursery, or sometimes even to go and sort of meet someone for an afternoon lunch, and maybe I'll extend that for a couple of hours. I think it's really important for people to have that transparency, and that busyness is a decision, right? Like we end up doing what we want to do. But I think most importantly, we have to encourage that. And I'd say sometimes even enforce balance for our team, right? And so I've become a lot more conscious of highlighting how I can make time for me and my family, but also making that transparent. Now, at Ultimate, I think a lot of our culture, because our founders are from the Nordics and most of our employee base is actually based in continental Europe. I think that there is, and I'm sorry, I think the Brits and the UK working culture is closer to the US, and the closer you get to the US, I think the less, forward around work-life balance it tends to be. I think we're in a really good place at our company. So one of the things that is really cool is that we're still a startup. We don't have deep pockets, but we have a remote work from anywhere policy as well. So once you've cleared probation, you can spend up to 2 months a year working from anywhere in the world, provided within a certain time zone. But that is also actively encouraged and celebrated in the business. And I've seen how people who've been with us for a while have taken that up, and sometimes it's one of those things that it sits as like a policy and nobody actually does it. We've got quite a few people who have done it already, so I think that's really cool. But ultimately, as a leader and as as member of a team, I think it's really important for us to emphasize that our colleagues are more important to us as human beings than as a colleague, and that taking care of yourself and taking care of others is something that is just absolutely like an irreducible need, and whether you have deep pockets to sort of spend on a lot of apps and programs, or whether you just embed that into your culture, I think that's really important for us to do. And I'm really grateful that at least where I am now at Ultimate, it seems to be ingrained in our culture. And long may it continue.
Yes, it's that's a really interesting one, because I've just hired my first employee in France, and it's quite interesting because in the contract, and I hadn't realized this, but in the actual contract it says it's illegal to contact them as their manager outside of their working hours. So that was quite interesting for me, because I was thinking, what, maybe we should be taking more of a leaf out of continental Europe's book, as you were saying, because we're clearly not doing as well on not working kind of all the hours of the day. But and Penny as well, I think the management training, actually I hadn't thought of that, because we've all been through a lot of sales management training, but not actually for remote employees specifically, or like you said, under high stress. I think that's a really good idea. I mean, the other things we've done is kind of much of the same in terms of blocking out slots, but we actually block out slots in our diaries. So the entire business has 12:30 to 1:30 booked out. So no one can book. It says no internal meetings basically, but we also have 2 longer blocks from 10 till 2 on a Tuesday and on a Friday. And I think the importance of that is that it's not just I need to nip out and get my lunch. It was also, we felt that the internal meetings were going a bit wild, and people really do need a solid amount of time to get their head into something when it's more of a project maybe that they're working on. So I think even just the incremental small bits is just as important to have maybe some larger blocked sessions. So we do that. The other thing I think that I've seen working really well in my company previously was we actually invested in things like giving a benefit. I think it was something like £500 for each employee, which was quite a lot, but over the year, and you could spend it on anything as long as it was health related. So you would just go with your receipt and someone would have bought an Apple Watch or a new pair of running trainers. And as long as you could prove that it had something to do with health or well-being, they would just sign it off as an expense.
I bet there's some random connections to health, wasn't there?
Yeah, it got a bit iffy on the sports workout after a while, but that was really, really good. And then the one of the main things we do as a company, as well as more of a sort of tool, is we've invested in Spill, which is a really great kind of mental health support tool. And it's managed through Slack or MS Teams as well. So we have it on Slack, and it's basically every single person in the company has access. We've decided on being able to give every employee 3 therapy sessions a year, but if you needed more, then you can take that. And I think that's been a really great selling point actually through our recruitment process, because candidates can see we're actually doing something more than just talking about mental well-being. We're investing in it. And it's also been really useful in my one-to-ones as a manager, where I can see people are feeling even just slightly stressed, or it could be a financial worry. And a lot of the time I'm guiding them to, have you thought about just messaging someone on Spill? It's completely anonymous. And I think Spill talks to, for every company that they sign up with, it's more than 60% of the workforce, or a company's workforce, that then use their services. So it's obviously very popular when used. So I'd suggest looking at that as well.
Sure. Lovely. Penny, you were gonna say something then?
I was just I was agreeing with Natalie, but I also was thinking about, I forgot, one of the things the company did was add 2 wellbeing days, paid wellbeing days onto holiday, and then also gave everyone $250 actually to spend on whatever, really. I think it was going to be logistically, when you get to 800 employees, to check that they just put it in the pay packet actually, because I think it was too difficult to deal with the receipts. But actually, that was something I was going to add to it. And also on the personal note, I was the bit with Enrique saying, sorry, focus time, leading from example. Totally agree with that. I actually put in picking kids up from school, going for a run, break, or I put focus time, to your point, Natalie, so that everyone else can see that that's accepted. I think it's really important.
I agree. I think in some companies it's hidden, and like when I was at LinkedIn, if I was in the office and we wanted, not just because of lockdown, as in before lockdown, if I was leaving to go pick my daughter up at 4 o'clock, I'd say to everybody, I'm going to go pick my daughter up, because then people go, oh, that's okay. And because you're open about it, the worst thing you can do is hide it. One thing that we do here that I'll just hopefully give people a takeaway is there's the Peak Performance Pyramid by Schwartz and Law, that it looks at what we need to be at our best. And it's about putting rituals in place around mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual rituals. And what we do is probably at least once a quarter, we'll do a stand-up where I will explain what this all means. And then you go into smaller groups and you discuss which of those areas you are strong in and you are happy with, whether it's so like mental, are you spending enough time with your family? Are you doing the right things? Are you exercising under the physical side? And make a commitment in a category that you're not doing enough, so that we can go, right, okay, I need to spend more time with family. I need to do the things I love, or I need to take bigger breaks. And I think that helps us a lot. It shows us that we actually care. And I agree, it has to come from leadership. I will always go first with my thoughts and and it's normally about exercise because I'm crap at it, but it's going first. You're showing that you're committed to it as well. Tell us more takeaways that people can leave this and go, I'm going to implement this quick and easily. Anybody?
On this particular topic?
Yeah, on helping ourselves or our teams look after themselves. And I mean, one thing for me was I found that people weren't taking holiday. So I was tracking it, even just to take a day off and look after themselves and do something. What else are we doing about it?
I've got one actually. So this was very specific, but we had a refresh on Zoom meetings. So we went through and reviewed at the beginning of the month what meetings, how many meetings are we in internally as a group, as a team, sales team, how many are worthwhile. I reviewed not the one-to-ones, but we had to go through the sacred. I didn't kept the essentials, obviously, but we had to go through, and that was feeding back to prioritizing goals. Like where should we be doubling down and where should we be saying no to? And that was part of the OKR process. And then we had a clear out of Zoom meetings, actually. And then a rule of no more than 45 minutes on a Zoom, and you have to have a break between some. But that's what we did.
Some breaks.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do reflect a lot on the fact that we are able to meet with each other in person again, right? Under certain strict rules a lot of the times, or personal preferences as well. So, you know, I feel like it's really important now to understand that, but also the fact that we are predominantly remote, right? And so what we used to do a lot of, and I think if you'd been on these kind of roundtables maybe 12 months ago, you'd hear about how you could do all these like, you know, remote activities via video conferencing, like let's go and like do some cooking thing together, or, you know, maybe a stand-up comedian together. I think now what we've got to understand is that we have a lot more opportunities to meet in person, and we need to create more opportunities to do that, not for work, but for socializing. And so, you know, I don't get to visit my remote teams as often as I'd like, but when I do, I always try and make sure that there are opportunities for lunches or after work socializing. Whereas in the past, it would be a lot more sporadic and impromptu. Hey, who's in the office today? Let's go out for a drink. Or who's in the office today? Let's get lunch together. Now I kind of like, I've planned out when, for example, I'm going to be in the office, or when other managers are going to be in the office. And we've got these things booked in well in advance, right? For people to be able to plan around it. And I do think that has an impact on mental well-being, because when you do meet with people in person, you don't feel that pressure to actually do work and like, okay, let's meet in person to do this workshop, or let's meet in person to make this big decision. But actually, just meet in person to hang out. But actually having that booked in advance. Natalie, you mentioned like no meeting days. Our company does that, but I think we kind of do it not in the best possible way, because each department have their own no meeting days, and so you try and book a cross-departmental meeting, and all of a sudden like those days got out.
Yeah.
So one thing I will advocate for is, yes, no meeting days are fantastic, but try and like get some kind of alignment around your cluster of teams. So if you're in sales, it might be sales, marketing, sales development, and customer success all have the same no meeting days. But I think that's definitely a positive. When people know I've got that day, or I'm not going to have meeting fatigue.
Or just doing company-wide.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do. We have rest days and focus days. Focus day, there's no internal meetings. Rest day is we have the day off.
Yeah. The other thing you can do is get your IT team to set whatever your calendaring system is. 1 hour meetings automatically become 50-minute meetings. 30-minute meetings automatically become 20 or 25-minute meetings. The lack of buffers, and like nowadays people just look at where have you got a gap, boom, put a meeting in there. You can just see people coming to meetings feeling crap. Sorry, I'm late, not prepared, don't know what this meeting is about. I'm just going from one to the next to the next. That really impacts people's sense of control and well-being. So having some kind of control where meetings are never a full hour or a full half hour is like a very easy thing to put in place that I think has a really positive impact.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, the one other thing from like a fun aspect as well is I think it's always just really important as well to try and get some of the things back that we had. Like we started just like a run club again that people can join, and you know, it's just on a Tuesday, whatever, at 5:30, and it's in the city, so people can just do that. But one of the things that worked really well in lockdown, and that we actually continued then doing, was in my previous company, we had this thing called, it was an Advent challenge, and we used to do it in December, but then we picked it up in random months, and it was just every single day on Strava. You would track doing 30 minutes of exercise. It had to be 30 minutes or 300 calories. And track it in Strava. And if you didn't do it, you got a penalty. And everyone kind of joined this group. We had 50 to 100 people, and there was all around the globe. So we had people in Australia and US and wherever they were working. And one of our guys who's a bit of a tech whiz built just an app that was linked from Strava to a website. And it was like green on every day that you'd done your activity. And it was just so nice because it encouraged people to get out and do something. But also everyone would post the pictures of the walk they'd had. Someone would be at, you know, Sydney Opera House, and someone else would be snowing in London. And so like it just doing something really basic. But if you've got the skills for someone to link it all up and make it into a fun challenge, then that worked really, really well. And it was just a really nice way to be collaborative across the globe as well.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. I've got so many takeaways myself from it. So for me, I'm going to go look at 4DX. Sounds interesting. SLAs for hiring was a great idea. I think that we've not thought like that, and it does drag on. think rethinking the skills that we look for when we hire, because if they're remote, how resilient are they, and stuff. And also training managers differently. I don't think we've really looked at that. So I've got some good takeaways. I appreciate all of your thoughts. I'm going to finish, before I pass to James, I'm going to ask one more question for you all, just to give a short answer on, and also I want an answer from James on this as well. So what's your biggest change or prediction for 2022? Penny, let's start with you and go around.
Thanks for that one. I don't know if it's big, but I think there's a change. The shift from last year is going to be that we will be going back to the office, that in different places. So we were in complete remote. Well, our office was. I know we went back in a bit, but we didn't really. So then we're going to have, the world's going to shift again. And what does that mean for how all of the questions we asked today, which is not only for the workforce, but how we interact with our customers? And then how do we prep for that? Because some will want in-house meetings, some will want in-person, some will want hybrid meeting and pitches. So I think that's the thing that we're trying to figure out now. What's next, right? How do we work in a hybrid world?
I think it's really good point, because we've not been everyone talks about this is the new world, but we're not in the new world yet, because we're not a hybrid yet, and we're still in either all remote or all in the office. So it's a complete new world again.
Yeah, we've got to, because some people are going to feel uncomfortable interacting with you in person. They're not going to shake hands. They're not going to want to be in the room.
I'm used to that bit.
So I think we're figuring out that. How do we go back into a physical sort of environment to a degree?
Cool. Natalie?
Yeah, for me, I think it's the point that we were just making previously around, I think employee well-being will be prioritized to a much further extent than we've ever seen. And I think companies are going to have to put their, money where their mouth is, so to speak, rather than just talking to what we might have seen before, where people had a yoga session at Tuesday at 8 a.m. or something, and actually show where they're really investing into employee well-being. And I'm certainly getting asked that in interviews a lot more now, and having to have talking points, and where I can talk to things like Spill has made a huge difference there. And I think people have just, out of the pandemic, reassess their priorities, and there's just a much bigger expectation of what we as employers should be providing, whether it's a benefit or like all of these ideas we've talked to. I think that will become much more important in the recruitment process for when someone decides to join us over someone else.
Lovely, thank you. And Enrique?
Look, I think for this coming year, the biggest thing that pops in my mind is around how are we collectively, employer and employee, harnessing the ability to really level up and deliver, really high value add solutions to our customers. And I think what we've got to be asking ourselves if we're joining a new company is this company set up to support my development and growth and enabling me to be successful? And if you're bringing someone on into your team, how prepared are you and your organization and your supporting teams? How are you prepared to support, enable, and help your teams grow, right? And I speak to that from the backdrop of what we're seeing in the macro picture, right? Like, we have companies in B2B SaaS raising insane amounts of money. There's so much money being thrown at technology companies because there's huge demand in the market. But let's not forget that there is potentially a huge amount of bloating happening in teams. I've already been speaking to a number of candidates, because we are hiring, who are telling me 1 year in, it's like, clearly this company is overhiring. I'm not being supported. I'm not being developed. There is no thought to how we're going to bring all of this value to this demand. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is how are we enabling ourselves and others to grow and to develop? Are we prepared to bring that value that customers are demanding of us in this next year? And that's mainly what's sort of keeping me up the most in terms of figuring out for the next year.
I just want to jump in and say here to that one, Enrique, because I completely agree with you on that point.
It's a good point. Good point. Before I pass to James and ask him the same question, I want to thank you all for everything you've been talking about. What has come to light for me is the fact that, let's be honest, the whole COVID lockdown has been pretty shit for lots of people, but there's also some positives that have come out of it. I think that the way that we are now we looking after our employees, the way that we're thinking of their work-life balance, the way that we're thinking of how we communicate with, how we sell as well. All of this are things that I think it's advanced our industry quickly for the better. So I do think there's some positives. James, over to you. What's your biggest prediction or change for 2022 in the sales and industry and startup industry?
Well, thank you everyone for your contributions. It's been a fantastic webinar. I think the point I'd like to make is that right now, due to the VC funding, there's huge inflationary pressure on salespeople's salaries. And I think Enrique made a really important point about your speed of hiring process has to be really robust and tight. Everyone's talked about how you're differentiating yourself as an employer of choice. And I think you've got to make that extra effort to communicate with everybody that's involved in the interview process to run an effective process, because you're competing with so many more opportunities. In the past, you would have to do face-to-face presentations, and so it was difficult for a candidate to get around London or whether they were in the world to do so many presentations. But now they can jump from Zoom to Zoom. So I just think it's really important to think about your interviewing process, how you're differentiating yourself with all these well-being tools. So that's something that I would look out for in 2022. And I'd just like now to, I guess, take the mic back and thank each and every speaker for your contributions. Little round of applause for Ollie, Penny, Natalie, and Enrique. Thank you for all the contributions in the comments. Just to say that there is a networking functionality, and I know how many of us are desperate to bump in and chat with people and have a good time. So for the last 10 minutes, there's a networking button just on the right under stage, and you can head over there and have a couple of chats with people. This has been recorded, and we will send it over to you in within 48 hours. But thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you to SalesLoft for their sponsorship for this webinar.
This has been great. Thanks, James. Thanks, Ollie.